Dr. Sarah Chen pulled her diving suit tighter as the research submarine descended into the deepest parts of Earth's ocean. The Mariana Trench stretched below them like an alien world. She had been studying old legends and myths for years, looking for traces of alien contact in human history. Most scientists laughed at her work, but Sarah believed there was truth hidden in the old stories. "We're at maximum depth, Dr. Chen," said the pilot. "The sonar is picking up something unusual down here." Sarah looked at the screen. There was a structure on the ocean floor that didn't belong there. It was too smooth, too perfect to be natural rock. After 3 hours of careful maneuvering, their lights revealed something incredible, a metallic object covered in strange symbols. "Get us closer," Sarah whispered. The object was about the size of a car, made of metal that hadn't rusted despite being underwater for who knows how long. Strange writing covered its surface. But what made Sarah's heart race were the other symbols carved alongside the alien text. Crude drawings that looked like human figures, and writing in ancient languages from Earth. Sarah spent the next week studying photographs of the object. She called in favors from linguists around the world. Slowly, a story began to emerge from the ancient human writing. It told of strange beings from the sky who crashed into the ocean. Brave fishermen had saved them, risking their lives to pull the dying aliens from the water. The alien writing was harder to understand, but eventually Sarah found someone who could help. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a xenolinguist who worked with the few alien species humans had met, recognized some of the symbols. "This is Keth Mori writing," he said over the video call. "They're an old species. Very proud, very honor-bound. This text. It's talking about a debt. A blood debt." Sarah felt excited. "What kind of debt?" "The Keth Mori take promises very seriously. If they owe someone their life, they must repay it. This says they will return when humans face extinction. There's something else too. Instructions for activating some kind of beacon." Against the advice of her research team, Sarah returned to the trench. She brought tools this time, and diving equipment that would let her work outside the submarine. The pressure at this depth could kill her in seconds if anything went wrong, but she had to know more. The alien device had hidden panels that opened when she pressed certain symbols in the right order. Inside, she found technology that was beyond anything humans had ever seen. Crystalline structures pulsed with soft light. At the center was a single button, surrounded by text in dozens of human languages, some so ancient they were barely recognizable. The message was the same in every language. "When your species faces extinction, when all hope is lost, press here. The debt will be paid." Sarah stared at the button for a long time. Earth was not facing extinction. Humans had spread to several worlds now. They were still a small player in galactic politics, but they were safe. Mostly. There had been some troubling reports from the outer colonies about strange signals from deep space, but nothing that threatened humanity's survival. Her finger hovered over the button. What harm could it do? The device was thousands of years old. Maybe it didn't even work anymore. Maybe it was all just an elaborate hoax. She pressed the button. The device came alive instantly. Lights flashed in patterns too complex for human eyes to follow. A low humming filled the water around them. Then just as suddenly everything went quiet. The device powered down, leaving only a small green light blinking steadily. "Dr. Chen, are you seeing this?" Her pilot's voice crackled over the radio. "Something just launched from that device. Moving fast. Heading up toward the surface." Sarah watched her instruments track the object as it shot upward through the water and disappeared into the sky. Within hours, telescopes around Earth detected it, leaving the solar system at impossible speeds. Back on the surface, Sarah tried to convince herself she had done the right thing. The device had probably just sent a message saying humans were fine. Maybe the Keth Mori would be happy to know their ancient allies had survived and prospered. But deep down, she worried. The message on the device had been clear. It was only supposed to be used when humanity faced extinction. By activating it, she had essentially told an alien species that humans were about to die. 3 weeks later, her fears seemed foolish. Nothing had happened. The device sat silent on the ocean floor. Space remained quiet. Life went on as normal. Sarah published her findings, though she left out the part about pressing the button. The scientific community was excited about the discovery, but most dismissed the idea that it was really alien technology. They said it was probably some kind of elaborate art project or historical recreation. Only Sarah knew the truth. Somewhere out in space, an ancient alien species had received a distress call from Earth. They thought humanity was dying, and according to their own laws and customs, they were now obligated to help. Sarah tried to track down what she could about the Kethmori. They were an old species, older than most others in the galaxy. They kept to themselves mostly, but they had a reputation for being honorable and keeping their word. Some stories said they were incredibly advanced, with technology that other species could barely understand. As months passed, Sarah began to relax. Maybe the Kethmori had investigated and realized it was a false alarm. Maybe they didn't even exist anymore. The device could have been thousands of years old, and civilizations rose and fell all the time in space. She was wrong. Far out in space, past the edge of human exploration, something ancient and terrible was stirring. The Kethmori had received Sarah's signal, but they were not the only ones. Other things lurked in the dark between stars. Things that fed on living worlds. Things that had been waiting for signs of activity in the rich feeding grounds of the spiral arms. The beacon that Sarah had activated was about to bring both salvation and horror to humanity. The Kethmori would keep their ancient promise. But in doing so, they would attract the attention of something far worse than extinction. Something that devoured entire civilizations was turning its attention toward Earth. 6 months after Dr. Sarah Chen activated the ancient beacon, the galaxy's worst nightmare came true. It started with silence. The outer colonies of the Kelran Empire, a proud species that controlled dozens of star systems, simply stopped communicating. At first, the Galactic Council thought it was just a technical problem. Communication equipment failed sometimes, especially on the frontier worlds. Then the refugees arrived. The first ship that made it back to Council space was barely functional. Its hull was covered in strange organic growths, and the crew was half mad with terror. Captain Jextal, a veteran Kelran officer who had served in 3 wars, couldn't stop shaking as he delivered his report. "They came from nowhere," he whispered. "Ships that looked like they were grown instead of built. Living ships that ate our weapons fire and got stronger. They didn't want to conquer us. They wanted to eat us. Everything. The people, the animals, the plants, even the bacteria in the soil." The council members looked at each other with growing concern. The Kelran were known for being brave, sometimes to the point of stupidity. If they were running in terror, something was very wrong. More ships arrived over the following days, carrying survivors from a dozen different species. They all told the same story. A swarm of living ships had appeared at the edge of their systems. These ships didn't respond to communication attempts. They just attacked, using weapons that seemed to be made of living tissue. Worse, the attacking ships learned from every battle, adapting their biology to become immune to whatever weapons were used against them. The beings controlling these bioships were called the Devourers. No one knew where they came from originally, but ancient records spoke of them in whispers. They were a hive mind, billions of creatures all thinking as one. Their only purpose was to consume living worlds, breaking down all organic matter to feed their endless reproduction. The Council's response was swift. Every member species contributed ships to create the largest military force in galactic history. Millions of years of technological development were brought together. The combined fleet included the Zolani's phase shift fighters, the Morvex gravity cannons, and the legendary throne ships of the hegemony. Admiral Kreshivor, the greatest military mind of his generation, was put in command. His plan was simple but effective. Meet the swarm at the edge of Council space and destroy them before they could reach any more populated worlds. The battle took place in the Terminus Nebula, a region of space filled with gas clouds and stellar debris. It seemed like the perfect place for an ambush. The Council fleet waited in hidden positions while scout ships led the swarm into the trap. What happened next would be remembered as the darkest day in galactic history. The swarm didn't fall for the trap. Instead, they had set one of their own. As the Council fleet moved to attack, massive bioships emerged from hiding spots throughout the nebula. These weren't the medium-sized vessels that had attacked the outer colonies. These were massive creatures the size of small moons, covered in weapons that looked like organic cannons. The battle lasted 18 hours. The Council forces fought with everything they had, using weapons that could crack planets and shields that had never been breached. It didn't matter. The swarm's bioships absorbed energy from the attacks, growing larger and stronger. When conventional weapons failed, The Council used antimatter bombs. The bioships adapted, developing armor that could withstand even those ultimate weapons. Worst of all, the swarm seemed to learn from every tactic the Council used. By the end of the battle, some bioships were using copies of Council weapons, grown from their own living tissue but somehow more effective than the originals. Admiral Kreshivor sent out the retreat order when 70% of his fleet was gone. The remaining ships scattered, racing back toward their homeworlds to spread the warning. The swarm didn't pursue immediately. They were busy feeding on the wreckage of destroyed ships and the bodies of the fallen. Among the fleeing vessels was a badly damaged Kethmori dreadnought called the Silent Honor. Its captain, Vorthak, was the great-grandson of the Kethmori who had made the ancient promise to humanity. Half his crew was dead, his ship's engines were failing, and his weapons were destroyed. As the Silent Honor limped through space, its automated systems picked up a distress signal. It was an old signal, one that had been repeating for months. The frequency and encoding matched records in the ship's ancient archives. It was the beacon from Earth still calling for help. Captain Vorthak stared at the message for a long time. His ship was dying. His people were retreating to their hidden worlds, preparing for a siege that might last centuries. The logical thing to do was return home and help with the defense of Kethmori space. But the blood debt was sacred. His ancestor had sworn an oath, and the Kethmori always kept their promises. Set course for human space, he ordered his surviving crew. Captain, our engines won't last that long, his engineer protested. We'll be lucky to make it halfway there. Then we'll drift the rest of the way, Vorthak replied. The debt will be paid. Meanwhile, in human space, people watched the news with growing horror. Refugee ships were streaming past human colonies, carrying tales of entire civilizations being devoured. The creatures in these bioships didn't just kill people. They consumed everything, leaving dead worlds behind them. Earth's government called an emergency session. Humanity's military was pathetic compared to the forces that had just been defeated. Humans had a few hundred ships, most of them designed for exploration or light patrol duties. The most powerful human weapon was a fusion bomb that could crack a large asteroid. Against the swarm, it would be like throwing rocks at a hurricane. General Martinez, head of Earth's military, was blunt in his assessment. We have maybe 2 weeks before they reach our outer colonies. Our best strategy is evacuation. Load up every ship we have with people and run. President Walsh looked around the room at her advisors. They all had the same hopeless expression. Humanity had reached for the stars, only to discover they were about to be devoured by something from the dark between worlds. How many people can we evacuate? She asked. Maybe 10 million if we're lucky, Martinez replied. There are 40 billion humans spread across our colonies. The room fell silent. In 2 weeks, humanity might cease to exist, but help was coming, though they didn't know it yet. Captain Vorthak's crippled ship was still 3 days away, carrying with it the key to humanity's survival. The Kethmori were about to honor a debt that was thousands of years old, and in doing so, they would unleash something the galaxy had never seen before. They were about to give humans the tools of war. The Silent Honor arrived at Earth just as the first swarm scouts entered the outer edge of the solar system. Captain Vorthak's ship was more dead than alive. Its hull was cracked, life support was failing, and only a handful of crew remained conscious. But the Kethmori captain had kept his word. Earth's defense satellites detected the alien ship as it limped past Mars. General Martinez was ready to shoot first and ask questions later, but Dr. Sarah Chen recognized the energy signature from her oceanic research. This was definitely Kethmori technology. Unknown alien vessel, this is Earth Defense Command, Martinez broadcast on all frequencies. Identify yourself immediately. The response came in broken, heavily accented English. This is Captain Vorthak of the Kethmori vessel Silent Honor. I come to honor an ancient debt. Your species called for help. The Kethmori always pay what they owe. President Walsh was brought into the communication immediately. The leader of humanity found herself talking to an alien whose grandfather had sworn an oath to help humans 3,000 years ago. Captain Vorthak, we appreciate your response, but I'm afraid we're facing an enemy that destroyed the entire Galactic Council fleet. Your ship appears to be damaged. How can you possibly help us? There was a long pause before Vorthak answered. My ship is dying, yes, but I carry something that may save your people. We call it the Forge of Wars. It is our most sacred secret. shared only in times of ultimate need. The Forge of Wars, as Vorthak explained, was hidden in a pocket of folded space near Earth's moon. The K'Mori had built it millions of years ago as their ultimate weapon manufacturing facility. Inside were the complete technological databases of every species the K'Mori had ever encountered, including dozens of civilizations that had been destroyed by various galactic threats. The Forge can build ships, weapons, anything needed for war, Vorthak said. But there is a problem. It was designed for K'Mori minds. The neural interface kills most species instantly. The few who survive go insane within hours. Dr. Chen leaned forward. But you think humans might be different? Your species has something unusual, Vorthak replied. We have studied you since first contact. Humans are adaptable in ways that confuse us. You survive things that should kill you. You think in patterns that other species cannot follow. Most importantly, you do not break when faced with the tools of ultimate destruction. That last point was important. The Forge of Wars contained not just weapons technology, but the complete military knowledge of civilizations that had fought wars for millions of years. The sheer scope of violence and destruction contained in its databases had driven other species mad. Even the K'Mori could only use it for short periods before needing mental recovery time. President Walsh made the decision that would change human history forever. Show us this forge. Captain Vorthak used the last of his ship's power to activate the ancient coordinates. Reality twisted near Earth's moon, as a structure larger than most space stations materialized from its hidden dimension. The Forge of Wars looked like a massive factory merged with a computer, all wrapped in armor that gleamed with impossible colors. The first human volunteers were military personnel and scientists. Dr. Chen insisted on being among them, arguing that since she had activated the original beacon, she should be part of the solution. General Martinez selected his best pilots and tacticians. They all knew they might die, but humanity had nothing left to lose. The neural interface process was unlike anything humans had ever experienced. Volunteers lay in crystalline pods while alien technology made direct connections to their brains. The first few attempts failed, not because the humans died, but because their minds were overwhelmed by the sheer amount of information. Then Dr. Chen had an idea. Instead of trying to absorb everything at once, what if they approached it like learning a language? Start with basic concepts and build up gradually. It worked. Within hours, the first successful human operators were walking around inside the forge, their minds linked to databases containing millions of years of military knowledge. But what amazed Captain Vorthak was how the humans were using this information. The K'Mori had always used the forge's knowledge exactly as recorded. If Species A had developed a particular weapon, they built that weapon the same way. Humans were different. They took the weapon designs from Species A, combined them with defensive techniques from Species B, and added tactical innovations from Species C, creating something entirely new, major. Elena Vasquez was the first human to successfully design a complete warship using the forge. Her creation looked nothing like traditional human vessels or any of the alien designs in the database. It was sleek and predatory, incorporating biological elements learned from studying the swarm's own ships, but twisted to serve human purposes. What are you calling it? Dr. Chen asked as they watched the forge manufacture the first vessel. The debt collector, Vasquez replied grimly. As more humans successfully interfaced with the forge, the rate of production increased dramatically. The ancient facility had been designed to outfit entire galactic civilizations for war. With human creativity guiding its manufacturing processes, it began producing ships and weapons at a rate that would have seemed impossible. But the real breakthrough came when the human operators realized they could modify the forge itself. The K'Mori had built it to manufacture known technologies. Humans began programming it to create entirely new concepts, weapons that had never existed before, combining principles from completely different fields of science. Captain Vorthak watched this transformation with growing amazement and something that might have been fear. In 3 days, humans had learned to use technology that had taken his people millennia to develop. More than that, they were improving it in ways the original builders had never imagined. Your species is remarkable, he told Dr. Chen as they watched the 100th human-designed ship roll out of the manufacturing bay. But I wonder if we have made a mistake. What do you mean? The forge was built to create weapons of war. Every species that has used it eventually turned those weapons on someone else. What happens when humans no longer have an enemy to fight? Dr. Chen didn't answer immediately. She was watching the tactical displays as human commanders organized their new fleet. They weren't just planning to defend Earth. They were planning to hunt down every single swarm organism in the galaxy. "I don't think that's going to be a problem," she said finally. Outside, the first swarm bioships were entering the inner solar system, confident that they would find another easy meal. Instead, they were about to encounter something that had never existed before in galactic history. Humans with unlimited access to the tools of war, and the creativity to use them in ways their creators had never imagined. The real war was about to begin. And for the first time since the swarm had emerged from dark space, they were going to face an enemy that was not just desperate, but angry. The first battle between humans and the swarm took place in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. The swarm had sent a scouting force of 50 bioships, expecting to find the same terrified prey they had encountered everywhere else in the galaxy. Instead, they found something completely unexpected. The human fleet didn't look like anything the swarm had seen before. The ships were sleek and angular, covered in armor that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. When the bioships tried to scan them, the readings came back confused and contradictory. The human vessels seemed to exist and not exist at the same time. Admiral Elena Vasquez, commanding from the flagship debt collector, watched the swarm ships approach with cold calculation. 3 days ago, she had been a simple fighter pilot. Now her mind was connected to the military wisdom of 100 extinct civilizations, and she understood warfare in ways that would have been impossible before. "Target the lead bioship," she ordered. "Fire the entropy beam." The entropy beam was a human innovation, combining energy manipulation techniques from 6 different species. Instead of trying to destroy the bioship's armor, it attacked the molecular bonds that held the creature together. The massive alien vessel simply came apart at the atomic level, dissolving into component particles. The other swarm ships reacted instantly, their bioarmor beginning to adapt. This was their standard response: analyze the enemy weapon and develop immunity. It had worked against every other species they had encountered. It didn't work against humans. Phase 2, Vasquez ordered. The second wave of human weapons was completely different. Gravity disruptors that created miniature black holes inside the bioships, quantum viruses that corrupted the neural connections between swarm organisms, temporal mines that aged sections of enemy ships thousands of years in seconds. Every time the swarm began to adapt to one type of attack, the humans switched to something completely different. The bioship's ability to evolve was useless when they couldn't predict what they needed to evolve against. Within an hour, the entire swarm scouting force was destroyed. Not one human ship was even damaged, but Vasquez wasn't satisfied. "Communications, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we need the location of every swarm concentration in the galaxy. We're not just defending anymore. We're going hunting." President Walsh received the message with mixed feelings. The human fleet had won, which should have been cause for celebration. But there was something in Admiral Vasquez's tone that worried her. The neural interface with the Forge of Wars had changed the human operators. They were still human, but they thought about war in ways that seemed almost alien. "Admiral, your orders were to defend Earth," Walsh reminded her during their next communication. "With respect, Madam President, defending Earth means eliminating the threat," Vasquez replied. "The swarm has consumed dozens of civilizations. They'll keep coming until they're all dead, every last one of them." That was when Walsh realized what was happening. The Forge of Wars hadn't just given humans advanced weapons. It had given them the military doctrines and tactical thinking of species that had fought extinction-level wars. Humans were now thinking like apex predators. The human fleet split into hunting groups, each one targeting a different swarm concentration. They used tactics that no other species had ever tried because no other species had been desperate or creative enough to attempt them. Captain Sarah Kim's group found a swarm breeding colony in the Vega system. Instead of engaging the bioships directly, they deployed biological weapons that targeted the specific proteins the swarm used for reproduction. Within days, every breeding facility in the system had dissolved into harmless organic soup. Commander John Torres discovered a swarm hive mind nexus hidden in a dark nebula. Rather than destroy it with conventional weapons, He used the Forge's quantum manipulation technology to sever the psychic connections between individual swarm organisms. Billions of bioships suddenly found themselves alone, without the collective intelligence that had guided them for millennia. They died of something like loneliness. The most terrifying innovation came from Dr. Chen herself, who had remained connected to the Forge throughout the war. She developed what she called the evolutionary virus, a biological agent that turned the swarm's own adaptation ability against them. Infected bioships would begin evolving randomly, changing so rapidly that they lost all function and eventually died from their own mutations. Within 6 months, the swarm forces that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia were in full retreat, but the humans didn't let them retreat. Every fleeing bioship was tracked down and destroyed. Every hidden breeding ground was found and sterilized. Every swarm organism, down to the smallest spore, was eliminated. Captain Vorthak, still recovering from his injuries aboard the Silent Honor, watched the human war effort with growing alarm. He had expected them to defend their territory and then stop. Instead, they were conducting a campaign of absolute genocide against an entire species. Dr. Chen, he said during one of their meetings, "The swarm is defeated. Your people are safe. Why do you continue?" Chen looked at him with eyes that held the tactical wisdom of a dozen extinct civilizations. "Because the swarm made one fundamental error, Captain. They threatened human children. They came to our worlds planning to eat our families. We don't just defeat enemies like that. We make sure they can never threaten anyone ever again." The final battle took place in the galactic core, where the original swarm hive queens had been sleeping for millions of years. These were massive creatures, each one the size of a moon, protected by bioships that numbered in the billions. No species had ever been able to reach them. The human fleet arrived with weapons that defied every natural law: reality-shearing bombs that cut holes in space-time itself, consciousness viruses that attacked the hive mind directly through quantum entanglement, entropy cascades that aged entire solar systems into dust. Admiral Vasquez stood on the bridge of her flagship as the last hive queen died, its death scream echoing across psychic frequencies throughout the galaxy. The Devourer swarm, terror of 1,000 civilizations, was extinct. "Signal all units," she ordered. "Mission accomplished. The swarm is eliminated." But as she said those words, Vasquez was already thinking about the next phase. The galaxy was a dangerous place, full of species that might one day threaten humanity. Pirates, slavers, aggressive empires that expanded through conquest. They all represented potential threats to human children. The Forge of Wars had taught humanity something important. The best defense was to eliminate all possible threats before they became actual threats, and humans, it turned out, were very good at elimination. Captain Vorthak received a final message from Admiral Vasquez as the human fleet prepared to leave the galactic core. "The debt is paid, Captain. Your ancestors' promise has been fulfilled. Humanity is safe." Vorthak stared at the message for a long time. Humanity was indeed safe, so safe that every other species in the galaxy was now in danger. The Kethamori had honored their ancient obligation by giving humans the tools to save themselves. They might have doomed everyone else in the process. In the depths of space, the human fleet was already plotting courses to their next targets. There were still threats out there, still species that might one day pose a danger to humanity. The war against the swarm was over. The war for galactic security was just beginning. 1 year after the last swarm hive queen died, the galaxy learned what it meant to live under human protection. It started small, or at least what humans considered small. Pirate fleets that had terrorized trade routes for centuries simply vanished overnight. Slave markets that had operated openly for millennia found themselves empty, their operators missing and their merchandise free. War fleets belonging to aggressive species discovered their weapons wouldn't function, their ship systems mysteriously failing at critical moments. The Galactic Council, what remained of it, tried to understand what was happening. They sent diplomatic messages to Earth, requesting meetings to discuss the new balance of power. The responses they received were polite but disturbing. "The Terran Protectorate is committed to ensuring galactic peace and security," came the standard reply from Admiral Elena Vasquez, who now held the title of Supreme Commander of Human Forces. "All species are welcome to participate in this new era of safety and prosperity under human guidance." The key phrase was "under human guidance." It became clear that humans weren't just defending themselves anymore. They had appointed themselves as the galaxy's peacekeepers, whether anyone wanted their protection or not. Ambassador Theknor of the Zalani Republic was among the first to experience this new reality firsthand. His species had been involved in a border dispute with the neighboring Corvan Empire for over a century. It was a typical low-level conflict. Some skirmishes, some diplomatic protests, but nothing that threatened either civilization's survival. The humans saw it differently. Terran Protectorate fleet arrived in the disputed system, while Theknor was conducting negotiations with Corvan representatives. The human commander, Captain Sarah Kim, was direct in her communication. "This conflict is destabilizing regional security," she announced to both sides. "The Terran Protectorate is implementing an immediate ceasefire. Both fleets will withdraw to neutral positions while we establish a permanent peace settlement." "You have no authority here," Theknor protested. "This is a sovereign matter between two independent species." Captain Kim's response was chilling in its calm certainty. "All species are under Terran protection now. We cannot allow conflicts that might escalate into larger wars. For your own safety, you will comply with our peace terms." When both sides refused to withdraw, the human fleet demonstrated their new approach to diplomacy. They disabled every military vessel in the system without firing a single destructive shot. Weapon systems simply stopped working. Engines became inoperative. Life support remained functional, but everything else was turned off by technology that defied understanding. "The peace settlement is non-negotiable," Kim continued. "The disputed territory will be administered by the Terran Protectorate to ensure it remains neutral. Both species will receive fair access to its resources under human supervision." Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Humans arrived wherever there was conflict, imposed their version of peace, and established permanent monitoring stations to ensure compliance. They called it conflict prevention, but it looked suspiciously like conquest to everyone else. Dr. Sarah Chen, now holding the title of Director of Galactic Security, tried to explain human reasoning during a broadcast to the surviving galactic governments. "We learned important lessons from the Swarm War," she said, standing in what had once been the Galactic Council chambers, but was now the headquarters of the Terran Protectorate. "Threats don't announce themselves in advance. By the time you recognize danger, it's often too late to respond effectively. The only rational approach is prevention. What you call prevention, others might call oppression," challenged Minister Yexval of the Hegemony, one of the few remaining independent governments. Chen's expression didn't change, but her words carried the weight of absolute conviction. "No species under Terran protection has suffered invasion, conquest, or extinction since we assumed responsibility for galactic security. Can any previous galactic government make the same claim?" She was right, and everyone knew it. Under human protection, there were no wars, no invasions, no genocides. There was also no freedom to make choices that humans considered dangerous. The true scope of human plans became clear when deep space monitoring stations detected massive construction projects throughout the galaxy. Humans were building something enormous in the empty spaces between star systems. When questioned about these projects, Terran Protectorate representatives were surprisingly open about their purpose. "We're constructing the Deep Sweep Network," explained Admiral Vasquez during a rare public appearance. "It's a galaxy-wide monitoring and response system that will detect potential threats before they can develop into actual dangers." The Deep Sweep Network was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Sensor arrays that could monitor every planet in real time, manufacturing facilities that could produce entire fleets in days rather than years. Most disturbing of all, automated defense platforms that could respond to threats faster than any living being could react. But the humans weren't content to monitor just the known galaxy. Exploration fleets were already heading beyond the galactic rim, searching for potential threats in other galaxies. They had learned from the swarm invasion that danger could come from anywhere, at any time. Captain Vorthak, now fully recovered from his injuries, received a personal visit from Dr. Chen 6 months after the Deep Sweep Network came online. She found him in his private study aboard the rebuilt Silent Honor, reading ancient Keth Mori texts about honor and obligation. "I wanted to thank you personally," Chen said, settling into a chair across from him. "Without your people's help, humanity would have been extinct. And now you're repaying that debt by protecting the entire galaxy," Vorthak replied, not looking up from his book. "Whether they want protection or not, It's the only logical approach, Chen explained. We've studied the histories of every known civilization. They all follow the same pattern, periods of peace followed by catastrophic wars. The swarm was just one example of what happens when threats are allowed to develop unchecked. Vorthak finally looked at her, and Chen was surprised by the sadness in his ancient eyes. Do you know what my people called the Forge of Wars in our most ancient texts? Chen shook her head. The last gift, Vorthak said quietly. It was built as a final resort, to be used only when everything else had failed. We never imagined giving it to a species that would use it as their first choice rather than their last. Are you saying we should have let the swarm destroy us? No, Vorthak admitted. But I wonder if we saved humanity only to doom everyone else. Your species has become very good at eliminating threats. Too good, perhaps. Chen stood to leave but paused at the door. Captain, let me ask you something. If you could go back and choose not to honor your ancestors' debt, would you? Vorthak was quiet for a long time. Finally, he answered, No, the Kethamori always keep their word. But I think my ancestor never imagined that saving one species might mean controlling all the others. After Chen left, Vorthak returned to his reading. The ancient texts spoke of balance, of knowing when to act and when to refrain from action. Humans had learned the first lesson very well. They had never learned the second. Outside his viewport, Vorthak could see a Terran Protectorate patrol ship keeping pace with his vessel. Officially, it was there for his protection. In reality, it was there to make sure he didn't do anything the humans considered dangerous. Every species in the galaxy now lived under the same benevolent surveillance. They were safer than they had ever been in galactic history. They were also prisoners in a cage made of human concern for their welfare. The last entry in Vorthak's personal log read, The debt has been paid, and the universe quakes in terror. Not from the threats we face, but from those who protect us from them. The humans have learned to wage war on the very concept of danger itself. I fear there is no enemy terrible enough to satisfy their need to defend us. Somewhere in deep space, human exploration fleets were making contact with civilizations in distant galaxies, offering them the same choice that every species in the Milky Way had already received. Accept human protection, or be considered a potential threat to galactic security. The universe was a dangerous place, full of species that might one day threaten someone. The humans were going to fix that, one galaxy at a time, whether anyone wanted their help or not.